Up in the Barns sub-project of SCE. It was set up 2 years ago to display the tools and equipment that we use in the orchard and in the meadow. We have a lot of things like scythes and sickles and various saws. We've also got a number that we don't use because they're too old or they're too interesting. So we place these on exhibition in the barn space. Now we have a selection of boot and shoe tools and sewing machines and domestic items. This allows us to invite the elderly residents for reminiscence sessions where we have a cup of tea and talk to the old people and help them remember things, which is good for their mental health and their happiness. It's interesting for us because we get to learn more about the way things were used in the past and helps us use them better now in the present and preserves that knowledge for generations to come. Our first display was a grass cutting display. We were mowing the meadow at the time and we had a scythe and a silage cutter and a sickle and a hay fork that were going to be displayed in the museum. So we put that together as a grass cutting exhibition because it was relevant to the work that was being done by SCE at the time. That grass cutting display has grown a little it now includes things like harvest customs and the local corn dollies.
SCE's work includes bees, beekeeping, and that's not just honeybees, though we deal with them, but it's also all the other bees too. So honeybees, bumblebees, cuckoo bees, they're the bees that live in other bees' nests. Oh, and things like wasps and hornets, because they're associated in with bees in various ways. They both make honey as well, but they only make a week's supply, fortnight supply, just to get them through, so to speak, whereas the honeybees are the only ones that carry on all through the year, through the winter. We're not very well served with bumblebees in the Midland counties. It's a bit of a desert here. There's more varieties, more different species in the nearby counties. So we try to consider rather carefully what plants they need and so forth and so forth, and try to conserve bumblebees. Now, we had a bit of luck. We found some bumblebees in a disused bird box, and it was just lying around, and they were clearly being cast out, maybe going to be thrown away in a skip for all I know. So I took them, which involved waiting till night, plugging the hole, taking them the next day, and then setting them up in a tree here, which is where they're expected to be. So the tribe is large, and we try to take care of all of them because we want the honey to go along with our jams, and we want the biodiversity, and we want the pollination for our apple trees and things as well. All of that's important to us. We have a copy of the pollen colour guide, which is pretty fascinating. When the honeybee comes back from gathering, we can look at the lump of pollen stuck onto its back legs to be carried, and by its colour we can tell what plants it's been visiting or what major plant it's visited. So the bees are telling us what plants they've used, and we can look at the pollen guide and decide what plants they haven't used, perhaps because we haven't got them. So it allows us to use the bees to tell us what plants to produce or conserve so that they have continuous pollen throughout the months of the year. Bees, honeybees, are about honey. We're about honey, and we're very happy that the bees are prepared to make it for us. But when they make it, they put it into a frame and they seal it in, ready for the future. When we take it, and we only take it when they have enough, of course, we need to get the honey out of those frames. We have to strip the cappings off the frames first. Then we take the frame, such as this. This will do just to demonstrate at least. And the frame goes inside our honey spinner. Lots of frames go inside the honey spinner, and turning the handle makes the honey come out of the frames, and then we can get it out of the bottom of this honey spinner through the tap at the bottom. Good old honeybees. The spinner here, there's no bees present. That's very good because it does mean we can involve children, and we have had little children turning the handle and enjoying the business. And actually, even visiting the hive and seeing the bees in operation is possible. And Mum got all dressed up in a complete bee suit, and I took her and her little child in a half bee suit wrapped into it, and we went to an actual hive and they could see the bees at work in the hive. Quite something for the little child to remember. It's nice that you can involve children, we can involve community in the business of beekeeping.
Right at the start of the museum project, we did a lot of research into the history of Abington Lodge. This has been represented by our timeline, which starts way back in the Anglo-Saxon period, comes through the Civil War and Victorian period, and then we start to get photographs from the First World War and right up to the 1970s. The timeline continues down onto the floor with nothing on it, because we don't know how far back we can take the history, and the timeline continues on because we don't know what the future holds, so it continues to grow. Our Abington Lodge site was left by David Norman Taylor in trust to the elderly of Northampton and to preserve this green space, the meadow. During the Second World War, part of it was given over to the Dig for Victory, and some of the vegetables that were planted we still find here today in amongst the grass. The main use of the meadow was for cattle, for dairy farming, and the milk was used in the early milk rounds in Northampton.
It's a fine day in March at Abington Lodge Green, one of the South Court Environmental sites. I'm sitting on a bench we made, on a path we made. The green goes all the way down from here, and we managed this green for wildlife, for food. Oh, with lots of events and community affairs. Let's go down on the green and have a look around. First thing at the top end of the whole green, we have an orchard we have planted. There's a may seat there, there's a fire pit there, there's a pond we've put in for the wildlife, seating, a willow fence. Anyway, we'll see the rest of it as we go down. And this strange affair is a willow fence, or fedge, half fence, half hedge. And it's the border, we call it a holy hedge. Doesn't look much this time of the year, but it's the border of our orchard, and it's nicely green at some times of the year, of course. Down beyond me there's this line of hay. It's our mowings from this place, and we put them there each time. You can probably see a little thatched cottage, so to speak. There's actually several different holes in it. The inhabitants in the cottage are Mrs. Fox and the youngsters. They've got to be the most comfortable, warm, winter places for foxes to live. So it goes all the way down, there's several different holes in it.
Each year at Abington Lodge we have a May Day in the evening. The May King and Queen are elected and they sit on this May seat. Each year we have to repair the willow and re-turf it. The foxes like to pull the turf off. The willow slowly deteriorates, so we keep it in good order at the end of winter, ready for May Day.
Just like to say how nice it's been to see South Court looking after this wonderful place that was left by David Taylor, the farmer. Left it in a trust for 52 bungalows to be built for over 55s. It is safe and it is very peaceful for the people that live here, many in their 80s and 90s. So I come down every day and sit and listen to the birds. It is the most wonderful place to be, and I couldn't wish to be anywhere else but here.
You can come here and just forget the world, forget where you are, and just escape. And it's nice to have a bit of the countryside that is actually right on my doorstep. And it's just a little haven of peace.
Peter allowed me to bury Poodle Kizzy down here. Unfortunately, we lost her last March at 13 years of age. There's not a day that I don't come down and just see the grave and tidy it. We're so grateful that we're allowed to have her buried here, and we can't thank Peter and South Court enough.
When we're cutting the hay that I was talking about, we have to be very careful because the place is absolutely thriving with frogs and toads and various species of mice. As we're mowing, we spend a lot of time saving these creatures, picking them up and moving them to a safe place so they're not caught in the mower. Plenty of frog spawn here. That's the only thing that's particularly visible at the moment, except that there's a water snail there, so-called wandering snail. The ponds are also full of dragonfly and damselfly larvae and a huge range of other creatures as well. As soon as you put water into a garden or put water into a site like this, immediately it's very important. It's important for the water creatures and for things like foxes, of course, so they can get a drink, and also important for insects, for instance honeybees. So ponds are important. What you're looking at now is not a pond, despite there being water in it. It's a wetland. It's dug much deeper than you see here, and then the soil fills back. That means it dries out for part of the year. That's a different habitat again. All the things that you've been seeing are to do with different habitats, because every habitat has its own group of organisms that live there, and so we're promoting biodiversity. There'll be frogs spawning here. Herons are frequently seen down here, interested in taking the frogs themselves as food.
One of the important jobs we do is maintain the hedges that we lay. This involves planting new hawthorn in amongst the growing hedge to make sure it hasn't got gaps and holes. Sometimes when you dig in a hole around here, you disturb the local residents. This time we've disturbed one of the hibernating frogs. She's woke up and gone off into the undergrowth, and she'll be safely back under the hedge soon, away from the crows and other predators.
So, Abington Lodge Green. Pleasant place, and we're trying to make it all the more pleasant.
Being in Northampton, and specifically Abington, we couldn't have an exhibition of old tools and the way of life around here without including boot and shoe and the leatherwork. Abington's not the centre of shoemaking that Northampton is, it's a centre where people lived to work in the shoe factory. So this collection of boot and shoe tools and the research that we did about Abington village and its growth with the boot and shoe has prompted a lot of memories with the elderly people who use these tools in their working life. And it also preserves the changes of land use, which is important to SCE, from farming to the housing for boot and shoe workers.
When I first joined the South Court Environment Group 4 years ago, I realised they were producing fruit and it wasn't being used to its full potential. So I started making jams from the fruit that comes from Abington Lodge, Hunt the Garden and the Secret Garden. Then Gleebland Allotment was producing vegetables. So started making chutney, and it has been very successful. We sold quite a bit at the places like the Umbrella Fair and our own different open days. So it has been helpful to the funds, which are important. We also on Abington Lodge have bees. So we produce some honey, and that again has been very successful because people with allergies like local honey, and we're able to supply it. We're very pleased with the way that it's gone.
If going by that, which could be up to 200 years old, if that's the date, that would be the contemporary to the oyster shells, because the oyster shells were found within the same stretch of rubble.
We used to cook them with the meat, didn't we?
Yeah, and they were like crisps in the day, weren't they?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Never had an
Everybody,
oyster. Sit down.
This week in the orchard we were digging a new drainage ditch, and we come across a line of rubble which could have been a wall or a ditch fill, and in amongst the stones and the rubble we found glass, bone, oyster shell and various types of pottery and ceramic, which we brought back to the museum and carefully cleaned and conserved so it can be dated and identified, so that we can find out a little more about the history of the orchard. It's similar, but it's much thinner.
It's very thin for the time, isn't it?
Yeah. Which dates it 1700. And this came out from the same context as that glass and that pottery. Yeah, I like that.
I suppose any of the sites we work on have got their own history, but mostly we don't know that history in great detail, but we know some intriguing old things and we're finding out more old things. There was a time, it actually happened in 1973, somebody dropped a silvery medallion here on Abington Lodge, and it turned out, it may have been dropped there in 1973, but it referred all the way back to 1473, the medallion, and came all the way from Maspern in Germany. So long histories go into making each of the places, and it's actually part of the fascination of the whole thing, to use the past, to work in the present, to sort out the future to be as good as it can be. And that's what SCE tries to do.
So that's the inside and outside of Abington Lodge. We're open every Friday from 10 till 4, and we look forward to seeing you.